On the 13th of September 2025, there was a huge march in London on the theme of freedom. Officially, according to the Met Police, 100,000 people turned up. Some people present said there were many more, hundreds of thousands of more. It was largely peaceful, but you wouldn't believe that from reading the headlines in The Guardian and the other mainstream media. Far-right London rallies sees record crowds and violent clashes with the police, said The Guardian. More than 110,000 people took part in a far-right street protest in what was thought to be the largest nationalist event in decades. One of the very few mainstream journalists who gave a fair account of the day was Trevor Phillips. Here he is speaking on Sky News. His honest appraisal and that of other users on X who'd been there couldn't have been more different than the Guardian article.
The most alarming aspect of the event was just how normal the vast majority of the marchers were. I spent an hour or two amongst them, and my own impression was that they were mostly the sort of people you'd meet in a country pub or in half-time queue for the loo at football or at a concert. There was a sprinkling of black and brown faces, and the event was brought to a close by a gospel group singing Jerusalem. All that must worry the traditional mass parties, Labour and Conservatives, now polling at less than 40% between them. They're draining support to parties like Reform and the Greens. And yet, a man recently out of jail, condemned as an extremist thug by most mainstream media outlets, can rally a demo the size of the entire population of Cambridge or Blackpool. A feat you couldn't imagine either Sir Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch pulling off anytime soon. Perhaps the people are sending us all a message. Let's see if anyone at Westminster's listening.
Sadly, the clip was deleted, removed from the Sky News front page. Britain's problem is not only does it have a dishonest and lying mainstream media, it also has a growing number of censorship laws deciding what you can do and say online. To talk about these issues, I met up with one of Britain's biggest alternative media journalists with 300,000 followers on X. His name is David Atherton, and we met in East Central London. David Atherton is a man of good living, chain vaping, enjoys a glass of wine, but he's also extremely hard-working and has achieved 1 billion page impressions for his posts over the last few years. That's 1.5 million replies. Most mainstream journalists can only dream of such figures. Among the quality media, only a few of its political editors outnumber him, but they have massive institutional support and there are huge overheads surrounding their operations. David Atherton is just one man and his laptop. It's a total challenge to the business model of the mainstream media and their cosy relationships with the political establishment of Britain. Atherton's watchword is liberty, explaining our first stop.
Right, this is the Church Bell Foundry in Whitechapel. It was founded in 1570 and was the Britain's oldest manufacturing company in the world up until 2017 when it closed.
This is probably better known as the theme tune to the Monty Python show. It was actually scored by John Philip Sousa in 1893 in honour of the Liberty Bell, the bell that tolled on the 8th of July 1776 when the American Declaration of Independence was made in Philadelphia. It's been a potent symbol of American freedom and independence ever since. But while it celebrates America's independence from Britain, the bell was actually made in Britain itself, here in Whitechapel.
We actually cast the Liberty Bell, which is currently outside the Independence Hall in Philadelphia. So also as well, it also cast one of the bells for Big Ben at the Houses of Parliament. Wow. I believe it's on the north-hand side as well. And and obviously most of the work they did was producing bells for churches. And if you want to look at the decline in Christianity You probably have to look no further than this. It's ironically 140 yards up the road is the East London Mosque, which is thriving. A good analogy for Britain.
This, and I mean, liberty, of course, is very important in the Anglo-American tradition, and now I'd say there's a strong kind of 1776 spirit in the MAGA movement.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
And it's partly against the establishments of both Britain and the United States. If they say, well, they're saying we had 1776, so we didn't have to have 1984. You know.
Well, indeed. Well, no. As many American commentators say, Britain was the modern inventor of liberty and freedom of speech and the rule of law and the Enlightenment. You go back to 1215 Magna Carta, the 1668-9 Bill of Rights Act. English common law, now British common law. Starmer and the establishment of this country have completely ruined it.
One of the reasons for Britain's reduced free speech is undoubtedly Islam, both directly and indirectly. Islam is growing all over the UK, as seen here in Whitechapel. But this documentary is not going to focus so much on Islam, but the British deep state. The UK is supposed to be the home of free speech. Hell, that's one of the reasons why they left the European Union.
Here we are.
The continent of vos papiers, vos s'il vous plaît versus the land of Magna Carta. But in the last few years, Britain's become a byword for censorship. And in July, the Online Safety Bill came into effect, banning pornography without age verification and many other restrictions which are said to be wanted to be copied by other countries sliding slowly into semi-democracy around the world.
Still believes in free speech.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time here, so we're very proud about that. We protect it.
Is this Britain's new soft power? In the 60s it was the Beatles and Monty Python. Now it's censorship. David Atherton and I talked about mass immigration, attempts to censor, distort, and cover up the consequences of mass migration, as well as the protests against it. England was my old home country. I was curious to see what was going on. Well, there are a few journalists who say it as it is, like Trevor Phillips. But apart from that, the main breathing space in the UK is X, where there are a lot of citizen journalists like David Atherton writing their stuff. But X has been subjected, along with other social media outlets, to an increasing level of censorship by the UK authorities. The latest is the Online Safety Act, whose final provisions came into force in July 2025. The legislation imposes a duty of care on online platforms, including social media and search services, to protect users, especially children, from illegal and harmful content, with enforcement by regulator Ofcom, including fines of up to 10% of global revenue for non-compliance. Obviously, critics say that the vague definitions of harm mean that the acts and broad and subjective definitions of harmful content could chill free speech. And unfortunately, it's not the only law in this area. We've got the Malicious Communications Act of 1988 and the Communications Act of 2003, which criminalises sending messages via public electronic networks that are grossly offensive, indecent, or menacing. It all adds up. Since the Online Safety Act's final provisions came into force only 2 weeks before he and I met, I asked him if he'd been affected by it yet, these latest laws. Do you think that
this cover-up has affected your account?
There's always the conspiracy theory, and there's always paranoia, and there's always, well, you know, I'm hard done by. On the first day the Online Safety Act came into being, for some strange reason, I got a notice that I'd been logged out. I didn't log myself out. Could be a glitch on my PC, could be coincidence, but I had to manually sign back in again. Although on my phone it was working perfectly well. But anyway,
Yeah, carry on.
I've noticed. I've noticed, you know, people have been saying to me, "I don't see your X posts anymore," and my numbers over the last few months do seem to have gone down. Although it could be I have increased competition from other people that. About 3-4 years ago, I had the sort of immigration of the Islamic market to myself to a certain extent. But now the new people have entered the market, so it may be a case of, you know, we're duplicating our work. You know, it's diluting my my viewership at the moment. But but there's always the conspiracy theory that's always at the back of your mind. I certainly, one of the most worrying things I read about and know about. There was a journalist called Charlie Astor, and if there was one person that had the actual Rudla Kabbalah murders down to a fine degree, it was her, and she documented in a pinned tweet, all in bullet point form, what had gone on. And on the day of his sentencing, she mysteriously lost control of her account. And there's no explanation for it. 3 months later, she got it back. By the way, the British government have worked out now how to circumvent VPNs. So they want to know your IP address. The boffins at GCHQ, General Communications Headquarters, which are basically our cyber spying agency, it appears that they've found a way to get over a VPN and find out your IP address.
Because there was a surge in VPNs after the online bill came, but you're saying, as you said, I mean, even that won't protect you from. Can they read your Gmails and your WhatsApp messages?
Well, you know, if the conspiracy theory applies to my account, they were probably trying to read my DMs. When I said anything.
On a specific case-by-case basis, or all the time?
Well, a couple of my followers have DM me. I assume they're giving me the information in good faith. They said they were interviewed for their X posts, and two of them said, "Were asked during the interview, do you follow David Atherton on X?"
Right.
You know, I always want to stay within the rule of law. I always want things to be done by persuasion rather than coercion. They probably didn't learn anything from or find anything incriminating against me. But I was interviewed just over a year ago, by the police for an X post.
Wow.
I was threatened with arrest if I didn't go down for a voluntary interview.
Did that cramp you? I mean, did you feel frightened, or it doesn't seem like it? It seems that you're carrying on as much as you were ever.
Yeah, indeed. You know, first thing I did when I came out of the interview was repost it. Yeah.
But yeah, do many of the people that you know have been questioned by the police?
Alison Pearson, the Daily Telegraph journalist.
Yeah.
She was visited by the Essex Police on a Sunday morning at 11 o'clock on Remembrance Sunday about one of her X posts. Yeah. And you know, we have spoken privately. She was quite upset about it. I'm a bit sort of swashbuckling, you know. I didn't feel nervous when I went to the police station. I just no commented it. I said, is this your tweet? No comment. What you meant by it? No comment. It's up for them to prove you're guilty. It's not up for you to prove yourself innocent.
Britain's surveillance, censorship and persecution machinery was made obvious to the world during and after an event last year, the Southport riots. So on the 17th of July 2024, 17-year-old Axel Rudakabana, who was born to Rwandan parents, carried out a horrific attack in a Taylor Swift themed dance class in Southport, Merseyside. 3 young girls were stabbed to death and 10 others were injured, including 8 children and 2 adults. He was a sadistic and ferocious young man, and he was sentenced to life in prison in January, but not before the Southport stabbing ignited riots all over northern England from the week starting the 30th of July. Protests turned violent, with some rioters hurling bricks at police. Over 400 arrests followed. And in the riots' aftermath, the UK cracked down on online incitement, arresting hundreds of people for grossly offensive posts under laws like the Communications Act of 2003 and the Online Safety Act of 2023. Over 30 people arrested a day, with the government warning, think before you post. Lucy Connolly was jailed for 31 months for advocating arson in a migrant hotel.
They've got away with being involved in the disorder on Tuesday or on Saturday. You absolutely haven't got away with it. We are coming for you. We've got hours of social media footage. We've got hours of CCTV footage.
Julie Sweeney was sentenced to 15 months for a post suggesting bombing a mosque, while Richard Williams got 3 months for threatening a migrant with a meme. Over 100 were imprisoned with swift convictions, often within days, aiming to deter but fueling debates over free speech versus public safety.
Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves.
So we'll throw the full force of the law at offenders, whether that's charging people with assaults, violent disorder, riot, and if terrorism offences are appropriate, I know the Director of Public Prosecutions has said he's prepared to consider that. We will throw the full force of the law at people. And whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you.
Sir Keir Starmer was soon dubbed Two-Tier Keir, the allegations that there were 2 tiers of justice in Britain. One tier of justice for whites who were punished severely for what they did online or in real life, and lesser sentences for, let's say, the rioters during the BLM riots, the Black Lives Matter riots of 2020, who got off lightly. After all, they were fighting white racism. There were a lot of jailings, and then you had the British police saying, we're coming after you wherever you are, which was rather alarming to Americans who are used to the First Amendment and thought that the long arm of the British law didn't stretch across the Atlantic. And then they got angry.
We do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
These punishments for online comments are not even restricted to race and immigration, which of course are sensitive issues. I mean, there's questions of guilt and so on that white people often have. It's as if the police have gone crazy. So people are prosecuted and arrested for making WhatsApp comments about their teachers. Nothing to do with race at all. We've got Maxie Allen and Rosa Levine, two parents whose home was raided by 6 officers following disparaging comments in a WhatsApp group about the management of their child's school and critical emails to the head teacher. Detained in front of their young daughter, before being fingerprinted, they were searched and left in a police cell for 8 hours before being interviewed under suspicion of a malicious communications offence. We've got Wikimedia, who's the Wikipedia Foundation, announced a legal challenge in the last year to the UK government, saying that the Category 1 duties, the Act's most stringent obligations, would undermine the privacy and safety of the Wikimedia's volunteer contributors. In other words, if they have to upload their passport or whatever, that would contravene Wikipedia's basic rules about being able to post anonymously. The WhatsApp story shows that Britain has a free speech crisis that's entirely separate from immigration. But the immigration crisis and the free speech crisis also intertwine in unfortunate ways. Half the British population want a stop of immigration and even to return long-settled migrants in the country. It's a strong, perhaps extreme position, but it's made worse by the feeling that the British people can't speak out freely about it. Of course, you can criticise immigration, especially in the abstract, and many newspapers do, on the right-wing edge of the spectrum, Telegraph or the Daily Mail. But if you're a private person and you criticise some of the consequences of immigration or some of the issues around it, like the possibilities that some cultures might be more aggressive and violent than others, or have lower IQ, or might be less interested in integrating, then you're in that grey area where you don't know if what you said will earn you a knock on the door, if not tomorrow, then next week or next month, as that policewoman said. And what can you and can you not say in your home or in private WhatsApp groups? And then, on top of freedom of speech issues, the whole questions about whether democracy is doing its job in one of the world's oldest democracies. You pull the lever and nothing happens. You have two parties, the main parties, dedicated to massive immigration increases, come what may. Why are they doing this?
I just get the impression mass migration is more conspiracy than cock-up. You know, it's generally believed that if there was the will to stop the channel migrants and to stop, the easiest thing to stop is there's 25,000 channel migrants who arrived in this country in the last since the start of the year. So that's what, eight months now, nearly.
There are solutions to the crisis. You could use drones to determine where they are. You could slash the boats before they leave the French coast, as being done here. At the very least, you could break up the boats when they've on arrival. But instead of that happening, they're actually returned to France, as this citizen journalist revealed when he showed them being loaded onto lorries and driven to the Channel ferry. What the hell is going on? This must have some official sanction. And that's just the Channel crossings. It's even easier to stop the legal migration, as David Atherton explains.
But in the last year, 800,000 legal migrants.
Nobody ever talks about that, even though it's much more important.
I know. At a stroke of a pen,
Yeah.
you could stop this happening. You know, you could get rid of 95% of 1 in 20.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's 95%. A stroke of a pen, you could stop 95% of the migration here. The Office for National Statistics has worked out there's a figure of if you have to earn £38,700 a year or more to be a net contributor to this country. So if you earn less than £38,700 a year, you are a net consumer of other people's taxes, whether schools, National Health Service, dentistry, infrastructure, everything you like. And only 1 in 20 migrants, 5%, actually earn more than £38,700 a year.
Wow.
And what you've seen is GDP per capita, GDP per head, our wealth per head, has gone down since 2019. It's something like 8 quarters in a row now. People in this country are now poorer because of immigration.
This gets to maybe the heart of the problem. The British Empire divided and conquered. Is it now dividing and conquering itself? Down the centuries, they would find a minority that was pliable and wanted power, and they would focus on that minority, let's say the Sikhs or the Muslims in India, and make them the ruling class, and then make it impossible for the Indians and the Muslims to unite because they were set apart by the differential treatment meted out to them. In the same way, you can divide families. If you have 2 children and favour one over the other, then you set them at each other's throats. And when the British didn't find a minority they could work with, they would import them so they'd put Indians in Trinidad or move them to Fiji or somewhere, and then the indigenous population would then be completely at odds with the immigrant population. They'd focus on those immigrants rather than the colonizers. Oligarchies, or the imperial ruling class, divide people to hold on to power. Power that is all that matters. You mix people up because you want to hold on to power. And if a consequence of mixing up people is the installation of surveillance laws that allow the intelligence agencies to control and surveil every member of the population and their tweets and their thoughts, then that's an additional advantage. Aristotle, 2,500 years ago, interestingly, so we're moving away from racial categories or the specific case of the British Empire, for those who are sensitive about that. Aristotle wrote in his book Politics that if you imported outsiders, foreigners, into your city-state, that was a great way for the oligarchy not to have to bow to the democracy, because the plebs, the people, would be so engaged. First of all, they'd either be fighting with the foreigners, politically, or at loggerheads with them, or they'd be so everyone would be so alienated from each other because they don't know each other's language or habits that they couldn't unite and form a common force to take on the oligarchy. And again, you can see parallels perhaps here. The other theory is that, look at these young, fit Muslim men coming across. They're very similar to the young Muslim males the Brits in the past 30 years have used to shake up the Middle East. They'll introduce jihadists and use them to subvert the regime in Syria, ditto in Libya. They got friends with the Iraqis. They used the Chechen Muslim activists to fight Russia in the early 2000s. So I'm not saying that's the case. Why would they want to do that? But we've got to ask the question, what's going on? On my show, I've had a lot of Americans, and I realised that the MAGA movement, or the insurrectionary movement, or whatever you want to call it, is far wider than just Trump himself and will outlast him. I think that although there's some American hypocrisy involved, there's a lot of crackdown on anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli speech in America, I still think there's a lot to be said for the American approach towards freedom. They really believe in it, a lot of them, and on balance, I'd say the intellectual climate in the United States is freer than in the UK, and American freedom is the root of their innovation and their ability to get wealthy. It's really worked for them. In the UK, meanwhile, though, the short term looks set to get even worse. It's not the last big demonstration, people's demonstration, velvet revolution, if you like. Atherton and his fellow citizen journalists continue to tweet. The mainstream media continue to cover up as they increasingly perhaps realize that they too are part of the political class, while the left agitates. It's going to be a tense year for the UK.